The wind howled like a wild animal. Rain poured from the sky, thick and cold. Hitting the metal roof of Jackson's cabin, thunder cracked in the distance. Shaking the lonely outpost at the edge of the colony zone, Jackson stood near the window, sipping weak coffee, watching the storm. He liked storms. They made the world quiet. No patrols, no neighbors, no noise. Just him and the sky screaming. But tonight, something felt different. There was a sound beneath the storm, a soft, strange cry. He thought maybe it was just wind through the trees, but it came again, louder. It wasn't the cry of an animal. It wasn't the rumble of machines. It was pain, real, raw pain. Jackson set the mug down and grabbed his jacket. He pulled on his boots and took a flashlight from the wall. He opened the door and the wind almost knocked him back. Still, he stepped out into the wet night. Following the cry, step by step, mud soaked through his boots. The rain stung his face, but he kept moving. The sound led him past the old generator tower. Down the slope where the trees bent low, lightning flashed, tanned for 1 second. He saw her, a figure curled on the ground, barely moving. She wasn't human. She had glowing purple skin, drenched and muddy. Her arms were long and thin, her hands clutching her swollen stomach, her face sealing but soft, with wide eyes full of fear and pain. Her body trembled like a leaf in the wind. Jackson froze, heart pounding. Aliens weren't allowed near human settlements. If the colony found her, they'd report her, maybe worse. But she looked at him, eyes locking onto his, full of silent pleading. Jackson stepped forward slowly, raising one hand. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. Of course, she didn't understand. But she didn't run either. He knelt beside her and saw her belly was huge. She was pregnant. Something was wrong. She was bleeding from a cut on her side, and she could barely keep her eyes open. Jackson looked back toward his cabin, then at her again. He could walk away, call it in, pretend he never saw her, but his legs didn't move. Instead, he slipped one arm under her knees, the other behind her back. She whimpered in fear, but didn't resist. Jackson lifted her, surprised at how light she was. The wind roared, and the rain came down harder. He carried her through the storm. Every step a choice he couldn't take back. Back inside the cabin. He kicked the door shut and rushed to the small cot in the corner. He laid her down gently and grabbed towels to dry her off. She shivered, teeth chattering, skin cold to the touch. Jackson pulled off her soaked outer cloths, some kind of thin space fabric, and wrapped her in a blanket. He turned on the heater and got water boiling for broth. The alien woman blinked up at him, still breathing fast. Jackson could see if she was scared, but no longer alone. "Don't worry," he whispered, crouching beside her. "You're safe here." She looked at him with tired, confused eyes. She tried to speak, but only coughed. Her voice barely a whisper. He pressed a warm cloth to her wound, doing his best to stop the bleeding. He had no training, no supplies for alien medicine. But he had hands and heart, and right now, she needed both. When the storm outside cracked again, she flinched hard. Jackson reached out and gently touched her shoulder. "It's just the storm," he said. "It'll pass." She stared at him a moment longer, then closed her eyes. Jackson sat beside her, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. She was still breathing. For now, that was enough. He didn't know who she was, where she came from, or why she was alone. But one thing was clear, she didn't end up at his door by accident. And if the colony found out she was here, they'd take her, or worse. Jackson looked out the rain-covered window. The storm was just beginning, and so was something else. Something bigger than he had planned for. Asterisk, the storm didn't stop that night. But inside the cabin, a quiet war was happening. The alien woman, soaked, shivering, and afraid, lay still under layers of blankets. Jackson sat nearby, watching. Her every breath like it might be her last. She didn't speak, not in any language he knew. But her eyes spoke plenty: fear, pain, and confusion lived inside them. Every time he got close, she flinched like he was going to hurt her, and every time he stepped back, her eyes followed like she didn't want him to leave. He warmed up broth, something gentle, something hot. When he offered the spoon, her hands didn't move, so Jackson took a risk. He scooped a little and held it to her lips. She hesitated, then sipped. Just one taste made her eyes water. Jackson didn't know if it was from pain or relief. Maybe both. "Good," he said softly. "It's food, not poison." She blinked slowly, then sipped again. Jackson could feel it. Her trust was tiny. But growing hours passed. The storm roared outside. Inside, Jackson's generator hummed quietly, keeping the heat going. He watched as her breathing slowed into sleep. Her chest moved up and down gently, like the wind had finally passed over her. He stood and went to his storage closet. There, behind the spare fuel cells, was a trapdoor. It led to his hidden basement, left over from his days in the engineering corps. No one knew about it, not the patrol drones, not even his old co-workers, and that made it the safest place in the world right now. He opened the door and stepped down into the cool darkness. The basement was small but tight-sealed, soundproof, and warm. He had an old medical bed, survival packs, and some clean clothes. It was built for emergencies. And this, whatever it was, felt like one. By morning, the rain slowed. But Jackson knew trouble was coming. The colony's sky scanners would have picked up the storm's energy spike. And if they tracked the anomaly to his sector, they'd come. Asking questions, he carried the alien woman down carefully. Wrapping her tight in blankets, she stirred, weak and half awake. When she saw the metal stairs, she panicked. She grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "No trap," he whispered quickly. "Holding still, it's safe." She looked at his face, searching for something. Maybe honesty, maybe warmth. Whatever she found, it was enough. She let go and rested her head against his chest in the basement. Jackson laid her on the bed and connected the small heater. He turned on soft lighting and covered her again. Her eyes stayed on him, never blinking. It was like she didn't want to be left alone in the dark again. "I don't know who you are," he said, sitting beside her, "but I think someone's looking for you." She didn't reply, but her hand slowly moved to her belly. Jackson saw it again, those strange glowing markings. They pulsed like slow heartbeats, alive and mysterious, and her belly looked heavier than before. Something inside her moved. He stood and opened his old tech case, pulling out a basic scanner. The device wasn't built for alien biology, but it could still detect vitals. He hovered it above her body, letting it beep and flicker. Her pulse was weak but stable. The baby inside wasn't fully formed, but its readings were strong. "What are you carrying?" Jackson whispered. Staring at the data, she reached out suddenly and grabbed his wrist. Her voice cracked for the first time. "Hide me," she whispered. "Please." Jackson nodded without thinking. He knew then this wasn't just about kindness. It was survival, for her, for the baby. Maybe even for him. Later that day, a distant buzz filled the air above the outpost. Jackson went to the surface and watched through binoculars. Colony drones, black and silent, swept the sky in formation. They were scanning for energy trails, ships, movement, anything unusual. Jackson returned underground, closing the hatch tight, sealing it from the inside. He looked at her again. Wide open, alert. Watching him. "You're safe here," he said again. And for the first time, she gave a tiny nod. That night, Jackson sat awake while she slept. Outside, the world was quiet again. But inside, something was changing. She was no longer just an alien stranger. She was someone who trusted him, and that meant something. It meant he couldn't turn back now. not even if it cost him everything. The next morning, the silence was deep and strange. Jackson woke up in the basement. Lying in a chair beside the medical bed, the alien woman was still asleep, her breathing soft and steady. He stared at her for a while, wondering who she was. She came from, and what kind of child was growing inside her. The soft hum of the generator filled the room. Jackson stood up, stretched, and checked the scanner again. Her vitals were still stable, but there was a small spike in the baby's readings. Something was changing fast. He made a quiet breakfast. Just some heat packs and dried food as he turned to bring a cup of warm broth to her. He stopped. She was already sitting up, eyes wide, looking around the room. When she saw him, her body tensed. Jackson raised both hands, showing he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said gently. "You're still safe." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing at his voice. Then, slowly, she spoke. Yasin." Jackson froze. She had just said his name. He didn't tell her his name not once. His heart pounded as he took a cautious step forward. "How do you know my name?" he asked, trying not to sound alarmed. The alien woman pointed at the scanner on the wall, then at his jacket. Jackson looked down, realizing his name tag was still stitched into the fabric. "Jackson," she said again, clearer this time. Then she touched her chest. Slowly, "Leah." Her voice was soft and strange, but beautiful. Her name lingered in the air like music. Jackson knelt beside her, amazed that she was speaking at all. "Leah," he repeated, and she nodded slowly. "You." "Help," she added, voice shaking. Jackson gave a small smile. "Yeah," he said, "I help." She looked down at her belly and then back at him. Her face changed, her eyes full of worry. "Child," she said, pointing to her stomach. "Hunt." That one word made Jackson go still. "Hunt," he repeated. She nodded, eyes sharp now. "They." "Come." Jackson sat back slowly, thinking hard. She was running from something or someone, maybe more than just the storm and the child. Inside her was the reason. "Why would someone hunt you?" he asked. Leah looked confused, then pressed her palms together and opened them wide like wings. "Forbidden," she said, not aloud. Jackson didn't understand everything, but it was enough. Whatever was inside her, it wasn't supposed to exist. Leah struggled to stand, and Jackson quickly helped her sit up on the edge of the bed. She winced in pain, but pushed through it. She walked slowly across the basement, her hand brushing the wall. When she stopped, she placed her palm flat on the surface and began humming. A low sound, soft and vibrating like a code or a signal. Jackson stared as the scanner beeped again, picking up a strange pulse from her hand. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. She turned to him, her face pale but steady, worn. "Others," she said. "Hide." Child, now Jackson was sure this woman wasn't just running for herself. She was trying to protect something important, something others feared. Maybe it was her species' last hope, or maybe a weapon. Either way, she was ready to give her life for it. That night, while Leah slept again, Jackson climbed to the surface. The storm had passed, but the ground was still wet and heavy with mud. He looked at the sky, clear but too quiet. No birds, no drones, no signs of life. But that didn't mean they weren't out there, watching, waiting. Back inside, Jackson checked his old COM device. It was years out of service, but still picked up colony broadcasts. He tuned it to the emergency band and there it was. Unknown energy spike. Sector 7 confirmed. Possible alien breach. His blood went cold. They were coming. He turned off the device and went back to the basement. Leah was awake again. Watching him, he didn't speak, just nodded slowly. She nodded back, like she already knew. There was no more time for questions. No more time for safety. He had taken her in, protected her. Now he was part of her story, whether he wanted to be or not. Jackson sat down beside her again and said only one word. Together, and for the first time, Leah smiled. Asterix Knight returned with quiet footsteps. But Jackson felt no peace. The air was too still, too sharp, like the calm before a trap snaps. Shut, he kept the lights low and double-checked every lock on the cabin. Below, Leah rested in the hidden basement, her belly rising and falling with slow, tired breaths, but even in sleep. Her hand stayed over her unborn child. Jackson sat near the front window, holding a wrench instead of a gun. He never liked weapons, but tools he trusted those. Out in the dark, the sky looked clean, the storm long gone. But his instincts whispered. They're coming. Around midnight, he heard the first sound. Not thunder, not wind, something worse. Footsteps on wet ground, slow and deliberate. Then the soft buzz of alien tech scanning the air. He ducked down fast, heart racing. Outside, 3 shadows moved silently toward the outpost. They weren't human. Their armor glowed, faint blue, sleek and tight around tall, thin bodies. They moved like predators, confident and quiet. One of them held a long device, pulsing with orange light. It wasn't a weapon, Jackson realized. It was a tracker. They were sniffing the air for her. Jackson moved quietly to the emergency panel and flicked the breaker. The whole cabin went dark, as if abandoned from below. Leah stirred, sensing something wrong. He signaled her to stay quiet, 2 fingers to his lips. She nodded and stayed still, her hand gripping the edge of the bed. Outside, the figures circled the cabin. One of them placed a hand on the wall, and the scanner began to hum. Jackson felt his chest tighten if they detected her energy signature. It was over. He had to do something, but fast and silent. He moved to the far side of the cabin and opened. A small wall panel inside was a forgotten ventilation fan he had rewired years ago. Now it led to an old mining tunnel, collapsed and sealed except for the first few meters. He activated the fan to blast warm air outward full of human scent and energy. The tracker outside beeped sharply, turning away from the cabin. They followed the false trail toward the mining site, weapons raised. Jackson exhaled slowly, watching them fade into the trees. But just when he thought it was over, one of them turned back. He walked to the door and knocked once, twice, then a third time. Harder. Jackson didn't move, didn't breathe. A voice came through the doormat, achin' strange. "We know she's here," it said. "Give her up, and you live." Jackson said nothing. The silence stretched long. Finally, the figure backed away and left something on the doorstep. Then they disappeared into the woods, after 5 long minutes. Jackson opened the door slowly. On the ground lay a small silver cube. He picked it up carefully and pressed the side. A projection blinked till Lively's face appeared, battered and bleeding. The image showed her chained, screaming, surrounded by shadows. Then a cold voice spoke. "She is property. She carries stolen life. Return her, or we take her." Jackson crushed the cube with one strike of his wrench. He didn't care who they were. Leah wasn't property. She was a mother, a person, and they would not take her. Back in the basement, she sat up as he returned. Her eyes met his, and she saw the answer in his face. "They found us," he said. She nodded slowly. "I run." "Again?" she whispered. Jackson shook his head. "No," he said. "We fight." Leah touched her belly, then reached out and grabbed his wrist. Her fingers were trembling, but her grip was strong. "Together?" she asked. Jackson gave a firm nod. Together. He opened his storage chest and pulled out his old engineering gearshock rods. Flash pulses, signal jammers. Not weapons, but enough to slow something down. He handed her a small wristband lined with copper coils. She looked at it, confused. "It blocks scans," he explained, strapping it on her gently. Now they won't find you so easy. She looked at him with wide, soft eyes. Then did something he didn't expect. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. For a moment, no words passed between them, only warmth, fear, and strange comfort outside. The rain had started again, but this time it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like war. The sky turned deep gray the next morning. No sunlight broke through the clouds. It was as if even the world was holding its breath. Jackson packed food and fuel into a duffel bag. They had to move, he knew it. But first, he needed answers. Real answers, not just warnings and half-spoken words. Leah sat on the medical bed. Hands over her belly, her breathing was heavier now, slower, deeper. Something inside her was growing faster than before. She looked pale, but calm. She had stopped. Flinching at his touch, she had stopped looking like she was ready to run. Jackson sat across from her and took a breath. "I need to know," he said gently. "What's really inside you?" She looked away, fingers tightening on the edge of the blanket. "I know you're scared," he said, "but I can protect you if I don't understand." Her lips parted, and for the first time, her voice was steady. "It is forbidden, child," she whispered. Jackson leaned closer. "Why?" Leah looked down, tears forming at the edge of her glowing eyes. "Not full alien," she said. Jackson blinked. "What do you mean?" She looked back at him, her hand now resting fully on her stomach. "Half human," she said softly. "Father." Human silence filled the basement like cold water. Jackson couldn't believe it, not at first, but the way she said it, the way her voice cracked it, wasn't a lie. "Human," he whispered. "But how? How is that even possible?" "Oh, she nodded slowly. "Crash. Years ago," she said. "Ship. Broken, human found." "Me," Jackson's heart pounded as she continued. "He was kind," she said. "Not like others. He gave food. Shelter. We lived." She paused, eyes glassy now. "Then soldiers came. They took him. And me, used our DNA." Jackson felt cold all over. Leah looked away again. "Not love," she whispered. "Not choice. They wanted power." He understood now. She wasn't just running from a group of bounty hunters. She was escaping from something bigger, darker. Her child, part human, part alien, was created in a lab. A test, a secret, a weapon, maybe even a miracle. They call baby. "Error," she said. "Not allowed. Not pure. They want to kill." Jackson stood up, anger rising in his chest. "Not on my watch," he said. He began packing fast tools, medicine, portable power cells. She watched him, eyes. "Why, do you believe me?" she asked. He turned to her with a firm nod. "I believe every word. I've seen what they do to people who are different. I won't let them touch you or that baby." Leah tried to stand, but pain shot through her side. She gasped, her hands clutching her belly. Jackson rushed to her side. "What's wrong?" She shook her head quickly. "Not now," she said. "Not yet." But her face was pale and slick with sweat. Jackson looked at the scanner again. The readings were rising too fast. The baby's development was accelerating. He cursed under his breath. "Okay," he muttered. "Then we leave now." He helped Leah into a cloak and wrapped her tightly. He led her up the stairs slowly, making sure she didn't fall outside. The sky rumbled. Wind blew dust across the land like old memories. They reached his small shuttle, hidden in the back shed. Jackson pressed his palm to the control panel. The ship's lights blinked on, engine warming up. But then everything stopped. The lights died. The engine shut down. "No," Jackson said sharply. Slamming the panel, he opened the hatch and checked the mainboard wires were cut. Sliced cleanly. Sabotage. Leah gasped behind him. Jackson turned and saw her eyes wide, staring into the trees. A figure stood there, human, wearing a colony uniform, Jackson's old neighbor, Reed. A man who always smiled too much and talked too little. You shouldn't have hidden her. Reed said calmly, "She's not supposed to be here." Jackson stood in front of Leah. Gripping a metal rod, "You cut my ship," he said. Voice cold, Reed nodded. "Orders," he said. "They're coming to clean this up." Jackson didn't wait. He charged and struck Reed hard across the shoulder. The man dropped fast, unconscious before he hit the ground. Jackson turned to Leah, who now knelt in the dirt, trembling. "Jackson." She whispered, "It's time." He knelt beside her as thunder rolled in the sky. The truth was out. The baby was coming, and the enemy was close. Jackson had never delivered a baby before. He had never even been close to one being born. But now, with lightning flashing above and enemies closing in, he knelt beside a pregnant alien woman in labor, in the dirt, with no medical help in sight. Leah's breaths came in fast, painful gasps. Her hands gripped his arms tightly, her skin cold and shaking. "I can't move," she whispered. "You don't have to," Jackson said. Voice steady but heart pounding. "I'll move the world if I have to." He scooped her into his arms again and rushed her back into the cabin. He had no choice. Now the basement wasn't safe. They had to get out. Now, but the shuttle was dead. Wires cleanly cut. He had checked already, and Reed's sabotage wasn't just simple. It was surgical. No way to fix it in minutes, maybe not even in hours. Jackson laid Leah down on the cabin's padded cat. Her glowing skin flickered dimly, her body reacting to the baby's energy. "Just hold on," he whispered. Brushing wet hair from her face, she cried out softly. Another contraction hitting her, he turned to his old Cums crate in the corner. Most of it was junk, but he had saved one emergency beacon. It could ping a nearby human outpost about 300 miles away. Normally, he'd never dare call them, but now they were his only hope. He powered it on, and the green light blinked weakly. "Come on," he whispered, turning the dial. A static-filled tone echoed through the room. Then silence. Then, "Sector relay active." "Identify." Jackson didn't answer directly. He tapped in a silent emergency medical code. No names, no details, just a request. They came, they'd come fast, but they'd also come ready to arrest whoever sent it. Jackson turned back to Leah. Her face was pale, and her body trembled. The baby was coming soon, too soon. Then he heard it boots. Not Reed, not colony rescue. Alien boots. The kind that didn't care about pain or permission. 3 of them appeared. Outside, just like before. This time, they didn't knock. They walked straight toward the door, hands glowing with blue weapons. Jackson grabbed the old pipe from beside the heater. He locked eyes with Leah. "I don't come back in 10 minutes, he said. "You run?" She shook her head fiercely. "Not without you." He gave her a small smile. "Then I guess I better win." Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft at first, then harder. Like the sky itself was warning them. Jackson stepped out and shut the cabin door behind him. The aliens saw him and raised their weapons, but Jackson threw the flash pulse first. It exploded with light, blinding them for seconds. He charged and swung the pipe, striking one hard across the helmet. The second one fired, but the shot missed. Jackson ducked and hit the second in the chest, sparks flying as armor cracked. The third recovered quickly. Raising a long staff, before he could strike, a blast hit him from behind. It was Leah standing at the doorway, holding Jackson's old flare gun. Her hands shook, but her aim was true. The third alien dropped, dazed and smoking. Jackson ran to her. "What are you doing?" he shouted. She grabbed his hand, breathing fast. "Together," she said again. Her voice breaking. Inside, her contractions hit harder. Jackson helped her lie down again. "Breathe," he said, trying to remember anything he'd ever read. Just breathe. Suddenly, the emergency beacon blinked red. Then a voice came through the static, medical ship inbound. 2 minutes out. Prepare for pickup. Jackson's knees nearly gave out. They were coming, help was finally coming. But outside, he heard another sound, a low hum. Not a rescue ship, a hunting craft. 2 ships, 1 human, 1 alien, both. Heading here, 1 to save, 1 to take. Jackson looked at Leah. They didn't have time for both. He made his choice fast. He grabbed the med pod hidden under the bed. He activated the shield core and gently lifted Leah inside, the pod sealed. Keeping her warm and stable, he dragged the pod outside just as the human ship broke through the clouds. A sleek white medical cruiser with flashing lights and a loading ramp open. But behind it, from the opposite sky, came the black alien hunter ship, screaming through the storm like a shadow on fire. Jackson waved at the human crew. Here. She's in labor. She's hurt. A medic ran down the ramp. Get her inside. As the crew lifted the pod onto the ship, Jackson turned to face the dark vessel landing nearby. He grabbed his pipe and stood in the rain. The alien ramp opened, and the hunters stepped out again. One shouted in a language Jackson couldn't understand, but Jackson lifted the pipe and shouted back anyway. She's not yours anymore. The 2 ships hovered in the storm, one bright and white, glowing with clean lights. The other, black and silent, pulsing with cold energy. Jackson stood between them, soaked in rain. His hands gripped the metal pipe tightly. He was only 1 man. But he didn't care, because behind him, inside that medical ship, was Leah and her child. The alien hunters shouted again. This time, their voices were louder, sharper. They pointed at the human med ship. Demanding, threatening, but the human medics didn't back down. They raised their shields and stood between the ship and the hunters. One medic turned to Jackson. You called us, he said. We protect her now. Jackson didn't speak. He just nodded. That was enough. The hunters took a step forward. And then something strange happened. Leah's pod glowed from within. A soft blue light spread out like a wave. The air buzzed, and the hunters froze. They looked at each other, confused. Then they turned and backed away, not because they were scared of the medics. Not because of Jackson, but because of what they saw inside the pod. A tiny shape, barely born. Eyes open, glowing with both human and alien light. A soft hum came from the baby's body. Not a cry, not a scream. Just a sound that filled the air with calm. The hunters looked one last time, then silently returned to their ship and vanished into the clouds. The storm ended as quickly as it had begun. Rain faded, the sky opened, the wind fell silent. Jackson sat on the edge of the med ship ramp, his arms heavy. Heart still racing. Then the medic returned, smiling wide. You should come in, he said. She wants to see you. Inside, the room was warm and quiet. Leah lay on a bed, weak but alive. She looked at Jackson and gave the smallest smile. He stepped closer, not saying a word. Beside her was a small cradle, and inside, the child, tiny, perfect, with glowing eyes and smooth skin that shimmered between blue and peach. Fingers curled tight. Breathing soft and steady, Jackson stared. Eyes wide. She's beautiful, he whispered. Leah nodded slowly. Girl, she said, voice soft, very strong. He knelt beside the bed. Leah touched his hand gently. Name? She asked. Jackson looked at the child, then at Leah. Then back again. Hope, he said. Her name is Hope. Leah closed her eyes and let out a breath that sounded like peace. Hope, she repeated. Beautiful name. The medics gave them time. They offered transport to a quiet planet far from the colony. A place where no one asked questions, where aliens and humans could live without fear. Jackson agreed. There was nothing left for him on the old colony, only silence and memories, but with Leah and Hope. He had something new, a reason to live. A reason to fight if needed. A reason to smile again. Days passed, then weeks. Hope grew faster than human children, but slower than alien ones. She laughed often. She stared at Jackson with curious eyes. She held Leah's fingers tightly when she slept. At night, Jackson told her stories. Stories of stars and storms. Of courage, of how one night, man stepped into the rain and made a choice. A choice that changed his life. Hope never knew the full danger she had faced, but in her smile, Jackson saw all the reasons why it was worth it. One day, as they sat outside their small new home, Leah turned to Jackson and whispered, "You saved us." He shook his head. "No," he said, looking at their daughter. "She saved me."